Hello, everybody, and welcome to my beginner's guide for Sid Meier's Civilization for Colonization. This is the 2008 game, I think. It's not the old one, that's the important part, and I'm going to be coming at this from the approach of a novice, somebody who is not familiar with Civilization 4 or colonization. You should be able to go through this video and afterwards essentially know how to begin your game. Now, I will make comparisons to how the game differs from Civilization 4 because while it is in the same series, so to speak, it is like a spin-off of Civilization 4. It is actually quite distinct in its own right, and it's much more than simply a reskin of Civilization 4. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'm clicking single player, and the best way to start a game for somebody who is not all that familiar with how they want to play it is simply clicking play now. So here we are given the opportunity to choose a nation and a leader. This is much like Civilization 4, except there are fewer choices here. There are a total of 4 European civilizations that you can choose from to play as. And what this is going to do, they're going to give you a certain number of bonuses. So here we select the Dutch colonies. We have Peter, what is his name? Peter Stuyvesant. It's a Dutch name, I believe. And anyway, he has a couple of traits, and so does pretty much every other leader here. There are very few leaders, so it's not going to take all that long to experiment to see which ones you like best, although I personally think there are some clear winners here. The Dutch colonies, they start out with a merchantman ship and 2 just standard colonists. And this differs from a couple of other civilizations, such as the English colonies, which start with a caravel, which is a different, but it's a smaller ship and it's a slower ship, so it's just generally inferior. And they also have 2 free colonist settlers. They're just the basic settler. They don't have any skills. If you go over here to the French colonies, they have one of the colonists is a hardy pioneer, which is definitely beneficial when it comes to improving the land, but I just don't consider them, that perk is not all that great considering what the civilization perks are. Natives are generally more amicable towards you, but the problem is the combat in Civilization 4 colonization is not all that fleshed out. You know, it's really probably one of the weakest points of the game. So you're not really going to be fighting many players in this game anyway, whether they be the Native Americans, which you can't play, or the actual European colonies. And the Spanish colonies are pretty much the same thing. They have a bonus against the natives, and they also start with a veteran soldier, which is probably the worst unit you could start with in terms of perks. So I would personally recommend starting with either the English colonies or the Dutch colonies. Now, the reason that the English colonies are not quite as good as they would be otherwise, because your John Adams is a real winner because he's minus 25% crosses needed for immigration. This means that you're going to get more settlers faster. And he also has a 25% Liberty Bell in every settlement. And this is important because you need Liberty Bells to win the game. If you're playing a normal game, you need to declare your independence from Europe, and that's going to require a good number of Liberty Bells in your city. So that is definitely a very strong perk, but it's let down by the fact that the civilization starts with the very basic free units: the caravel, the worst ship; the pioneer free colonists, the worst pioneer; and the soldier free colonist, the worst soldier. So, you know, it sort of makes up for that. And George Washington is not very strong either because his main trait here is minus 50% soldier equipment required for recruitment. And unfortunately, you really want dragoons and not soldiers in this game, because if you play the defensive strategy when the king sends his royal expeditionary force against you, you're likely going to lose. So definitely, I would either choose between John Adams or probably Peter Stuyvesant. I'm not 100% sure about that pronunciation, but we're going to roll with it regardless. And he has market prices are less sensitive, which is actually quite important because generally what you want to do in this game is specialize in one type of good or another, because that's really what colonization is about, is turning a profit, settling somewhere and essentially building a plantation, building a weaver's shop, and then selling those goods back to Europe. And that's how you make money. And eventually you'll have enough money to, essentially set up your own civilization independent from Europe and declare independence. So we are going to be focused very much on economy, which is why mercantile can come in handy, and industrious 25% hammer in all settlements is pretty much a perk that's going to be used throughout the game. In addition to this, they have a very strong starting unit, the merchantman, which has twice the storage capacity of the other civilization's starting ship, which is the caravel, and it also has an additional movement point, so you can explore the new world much faster. So I'm going to be choosing Peter Stuyvesant, but I would understand you choosing John Adams as well. I think these are the two clear winners in terms of civilizations that you should play. Now, the other ones, of course, if you're looking for more of a challenge, you could go ahead and try to play them. They might introduce like a unique flavor to the game. Like you could go with the Spanish colonies and try to conquer all of the native settlements and stuff. But it's just, and then, or you could play the French and try to befriend them all, and you'd end up with a lot of natives on your side, and they would help you fight against the English or no, the French king. But it's not, in my experience, it's not, they don't provide a whole lot of support. So that's why I play like this, but you're free to experiment as you will. Now here we have a select a map, and we can choose between New World or the Caribbean. This is basically what the land mass generated will look like. Now the land masses in colonization are all randomized, so you'll get a different map each time you play the game. I personally like a New World because it has a lot of biodiversity. You go from pretty much Arctic like tundra, snow, all the way down to jungle kind of terrain. So that's my favorite, and we're going to get started. Now here we have the world size. Standard, pretty much all of these, just leave them at their default. Difficulty is an interesting one because while a lot of civilization games are designed to be played at the intermediate level, I would actually recommend the easiest for this one, because even at the easiest, it is not necessarily all that easy to defeat the King's Royal Expeditionary Force until you've experienced, or until you know what to expect after the first couple of playthroughs. So here we have just our details. You can change it if you want. I'm not interested in it, and here we are. So we've been granted a royal charter in the year 1492 AD. His Royal Majesty, the King of the Netherlands, grants you a colonial charter. For the greater glory of the nation, the king dubs thee, Raising Hell, Viceroy of the New World. Explore this new land, settle it, and bring wealth and glory upon yourself and upon our great nation. So to achieve the victory, this is what I was mentioning a little bit before, we need to found our colony, declare independence from my motherland after attaining at least a 50% rebel sentiment. I'll get back to that concept in a little bit. In all your settlements, before time runs out, before time runs out, defend your fledgling country from the wrath of your motherland by wiping out all their ground forces. You must complete your revolution before any other European colony. All right, so the units we start with, as I mentioned, is the merchantman ship, the hardy pioneer free colonist, and the soldier free colonist. And okay, here we are. So I mentioned rebel settlement, and we're going to go in here, and this is where you start your revolution from. You can access it by clicking the fist in the air or by pressing F3, and you can always size up your forces versus the Royal Expeditionary Force. Right now, at the very start of the game, I have 1 soldier. They have 8 soldiers, 4 dragoons, 4 artillery, and 4 warships. And yeah, we probably don't want to declare independence too soon. And you can only declare independence once this bar moves up to 50%. So in other words, after at least 50% of your people support a revolution. So here you are starting in the new world. And as you can see, we're just in a ship and we get to sail. And we will sail until we reach land. Now there is the opportunity for you to go ahead and sail back to Europe. And Europe is accessed by pressing F2. It is simply this screen. This is all you have for Europe. And there are a couple of important things that you do in Europe. One is you get your immigrants here, and the other one is you can buy and sell goods here. And that's mainly the only point of Europe. And Europe can be accessed by sailing into these tiles here on the edge of the screen. They'll be colored. I think they correspond to the color of your civilization's borders. So in other words, if you're playing England, it'll be white. If you're playing France, it'll be blue. But I could be wrong about that. We'll see here in a second. So we did find land with our ship, and the 2 units that we have are in our ship right here. And now, as you know, with most turn-based games, once your units are out of turns, you need to end your turn. Since I haven't found anything too exciting here, because they technically could land with 1 unit, might not be a bad idea. We'll get on land there just like that. And yeah, you can do that. I don't know if I made myself clear here. You can do that by pressing either G or clicking the Go To button. You're on the unit command bar, and you can also right click. So in other words, if I had my pioneer here selected, I could right click on this tile and he would move there. However, I'm not sure I want to send more than one unit ashore because this does not look like a necessarily great location. So I'm going to end the turn by clicking the end turn button, and we begin turn 2, 1493 AD. Now, the beginning of the game is never 100% predictable because since the game is randomly generated, you're going to end up with different types of land masses, but there are some things you should look out for, like right here, fish. This looks like a very good location. Oh, that is a very good location in terms of food production. Now we have met our first Native American empire, the Incan Empire, and unfortunately, while it looks like we are on an island here, the Native Americans are pleased towards you. They're not going to declare war. They're not going to be hostile, and that's why we can only say there will be peace in our time. And they come into play in an interesting way, how they work with your civilization. So as you can see right here, we have 3 fish, and it's important to prioritize resources. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to claim those 2 fish over there, I think, because settling here would be better. Now, the concept of settlements is a bit different from that in civilization. So I'm going to land my hardy pioneer right here. And as you can see, we got a treasure. Treasures sometimes spawn out of Indian cities after you enter them and talk to the chief, or they can sometimes spawn out of ruins. So now this is a treasure, and we've been approached by this a little earlier than I expected, but we will get back to the settlement in a minute. The treasure is a defenseless unit, so if anybody attacks it, it's going to die. However, it is worth money if you can take it back to Europe. Unfortunately, it will only fit into 1 special ship. So in other words, if you want to stick it in your merchantman or your caravel, it will not fit. You need to buy or build a galleon. And I believe it says that somewhere on the treasure. It might, maybe not. Anyway, you need to build a galleon or buy one to get this unit back to Europe. And then once you get it back to Europe, it'll be this one's worth 596 gold, which is nothing to sneeze at. However, I find these units actually quite exceptional exploring the land, because since there aren't any enemies in Civilization 4 Colonization, unless you declare war on them, it's not going to get attacked. So even now, I mean, we've met 1 Native American empire. They're not going to attack us. The other colonists are not going to attack us. There are no barbarian units in this one. There are no rebel units that would attack any of our units right now without first declaring war, so we'd have to know about it. So I find them exceptionally good at simply exploring the land, because there's really nothing else I can do with these units until I get a galleon. So that's what I do. And we're out of turns again, so I'm going to end the turn and continue exploring with the galleon. Like I said, this looks like it's just a small island, which is unfortunate, but this might actually benefit us a bit. There are some fairly good resources here, and if I settle my first settlement here, I'm going to discuss a little bit about why I would choose this location. Okay, first of all, there is some wood right here. Now, I know that the wood is not too strong. I mean, that is probably one of the downsides of this location. There isn't enough wood, technically speaking. There is tobacco, and tobacco is going to make us a lot of money once we build a farm on it and start really producing a lot of tobacco. And then once this settlement, eventually the Incans will give up the settlement after we put enough cultural pressure on them. And when that happens, I will be able to work the deer here. Unfortunately, I won't be able to build. I mean, there won't be a forest on it like I would prefer. But, you know, you're going to have to find a game start that suits you. And in this case, you know, it's not always going to be perfect. So you got to sort of roll with what you got. And I'm just going to click the I'm just going to click the build settlement button. And he will, you know, the first settlement you build, the Native Americans will generally give the land to you for nothing. But afterwards, you will have to pay them for it, or you risk them declaring war on you. So now I'm going to enter the settlement, and you can do this by double clicking on the settlement like that. And this is one area that it differs quite significantly from Civilization 4. If you remember, in Civilization 4, you have citizens, but you can't really move them around like these. They're not specialized. And I think this is one of the most unique aspects of Civilization 4 Colonization. There are a lot of things you can choose from these tiles. It's not simply this colonist works this tile and you get all the stuff on there. As you noticed just a minute ago, I double clicked them, and you know, you drag them down to it, and you get to choose what you want them to focus on in that tile. For example, it has 2 grains. I could do that. That would give me more food. I could choose the lumberjack for 7 wood every turn, fur trapper for 4 fur, and tobacco planter for 2 tobacco. Generally, the one that gives you the most is the best, and in this case, that would be lumber. But at the same time, we want rebel sentiment to go up, and that might seem a little strange to you, but in the beginning of the game, there are a couple of founding fathers that you want to get, and I'm going to exit the settlement and simply go over to the founding fathers. Now, instead of research, in Civilization 4 Colonization, there are founding fathers, and you generate founding father points by doing various things, such as generating political points, exploring the world, trading, as you can see here, fighting battles, as you can see there, and of course, the catch-all politics. Now, there are a couple of very important early ones here that you want to get before any of the AIs do, and that is minus 50% travel time to Europe. You already have enough exploration points simply by revealing tiles on the map. Now we need more political points, and we get political points by generating rebel sentiment, which is expressed in this game through the bell system. Here we have bells, Liberty bells, I guess. They're not just bells, not just any old bells. These are actually Liberty bells. And once we generate enough Liberty Bells, our borders will expand. So in other words, Liberty Bells are sort of the equivalent of culture from Civilization 4, if you're familiar with that. They will expand your borders. However, one difference in this game over Civilization 4 is once your borders expand, you will not actually get to work any additional tiles. So what you see here on the screen is what you get. You're only going to be able to work the tiles immediately, the 8 tiles immediately surrounding your city. In my case, I can't work one of them because there is an Indian settlement on top of it. But like I said, that will eventually go, most likely he'll give it away once my rebel sentiment is high enough and if he likes me enough at the time. If the Native Americans don't like you, then you'll probably have to fight them for it. Okay, so we've covered that. That is my approach to the beginning of the game. And you have our soldier right over here. And I'm going to talk about something else important to note about how units work in this game. So this is a soldier, right? Well, not exactly. It's a free colonist with soldier gear. When we go in here, remember I had a pioneer? He is now just a free colonist. This is because tools made him a pioneer. So if we double click him, you can choose a profession, and right here you can, where is it? Oh, it should be around here somewhere. He should be able to become a pioneer. Anyway, you can't choose a profession from him in there. Here, you just drag him down to the garrison. And we can't, okay, I'm sorry. You can't choose an outside profession if your colony only has one civilian in it. So I would have to bring the soldier in, and we'll wait until that happens and I'll continue explaining. So here's the soldier. We're going to move him into Cusco. No, do not declare war. And I'm going to explain why I did that as well. So what you can do with your merchantmen at this point, just explore a little bit more, and then you'll probably want to head back to Europe by sailing into that zone over there on the right side of the map. And the reason you want to sail back to Europe is because your settlement will start producing crosses, as we can see right up here. Not right away. I think the default number of crosses produced every turn, and that will influence immigration. So the more crosses you produce, the faster you get immigrants. However, immigrants are generally not always the best. You usually want to contract specialized labor because having lots of people means you also have to generate lots of Liberty Bells before you can declare independence. So generally, you just want to keep as many useful citizens around as possible. So in the beginning of the game, crosses are very useful, but as the game wears on, you probably want to focus less on generating crosses and more on generating Liberty Bell sentiment and revenues. In other words, building products that will provide value that you can sell to Europe, and then you can use that gold to hire specialized labor. So they want me to choose a building in the settlement, and likely the best one to begin with would be the dock. The construction times here are very long because we haven't assigned anybody to the carpenter profession, which again is quite different from how production works in Civilization 4. In Civilization 4, you just work tiles with hammers on it, and that will increase the city's productivity. That's not how it works in Civilization 4 Colonization. If you want to increase your productivity, you need to take lumber and turn it into production. So in other words, if I move my free colonist here into the carpenter's shop, he is only still going to be making the one production because he doesn't have enough lumber. As you can see right here, he needs more boards to be able to convert them into production. And so that would require us to move him over here and to make him become a lumberjack. Then you'd be generating some lumber, and then you could take that lumber and convert it into production. However, we're not going to do that just yet because he's really inefficient at the lumber profession. What we would want is a professional lumberjack who would generate double the amount of lumber that a simple free colonist would. And this is what I mean about specialized labor. All specialized colonists do double the work of a general free colonist. So if you want to have a very productive economy, you're going to need a lot of specialized labor. But we're going to choose the dock anyway because it's not really important. We're going to focus on that a little bit later as we get some more immigration coming in and get a few more free colonists. Okay, so I moved my I moved my soldier into Cusco, and now we can click a special button because nobody else has, because I have not spoken with this city before. I'm gonna click Speak with Chief, and you can do this in every Native American settlement, and he will give you a reward if you are the first to speak to him. If you are the first you're the first European to contact them. Otherwise, they'll just tell you what they're interested in. And he gives us a couple of very important details here. The city is learned in the ways of expert farmers, and they need guns. And we can leverage this to our advantage. So expert farmer means I could take a free colonist or a criminal or a indentured servant, and I could send them to school here. As you can see, I can click the Learn Skill button, and that will make them into, in this case, will make this guy into an expert farmer. And as I mentioned before, the tools make him a soldier right now. But at a base level, if we go to Europe here, we can see a master carpenter, for example. These are trades. These are skills they have learned. Minus the tools, this is who they are. So you can have like the blank slate free colonist, which is what he is right now, but he can become anything else right now because he's a blank slate, make of it what you will. I could make him into an expert farmer here, and that would mean that once I settle him in this settlement and I put him on a tile to generate food, which is represented by grain, he will be producing twice as much grain as a regular free colonist like this dude would. And like I said before, specialized economy is very good. You want to train your units. But I think right now what we need is somebody to start improving the land. So I'm not going to send them to school there just yet. Now, the other aspect of this is they want guns. The Incans are interested in buying guns. And there are a couple of resources that you can buy and sell very early to the Native Americans that are worth a lot. And one of them is guns and the other one's horses. Other stuff, they sell for a little bit, but generally you're not going to make much of a profit off of it. And we do need to do some trading here to attract another very important beginning founding father, and that would be Peter Minute. What am I talking about? Anyway, this Peter dude, whatever his last name is, he will decrease the cost of recruiting units in Europe by 25%. And that is quite significant if you're going for a specialized economy and you don't have to train all of these units yourself. You can simply go in here and buy them. And that's generally how I play the game, but there might be some different techniques that somebody else. This is personally what I have found to be the most effective, and this means that I don't actually have to focus as much on schooling my units, because while native settlements can school units in the hands-on labor, in other words, professions that you do in here on this side, they cannot school on professions in the actual settlement. So they can school your units to make them more productive in terms of like a lumberjack, a expert trapper, an expert farmer, expert fisherman. You're not going to be able to make them master carpenters because that is like European skill that they're not familiar with, right? So those you would actually have to build a schoolhouse, which you can see is one of the buildings right here. There's a schoolhouse right there, it is. And send your unit to school. And after a certain number of turns, they will graduate and you can choose the profession of any other unit currently in the settlement. And so you can make them, if I have a blacksmith in here, I can, once that free colonist graduates school, I can make him into a blacksmith. But however, you have to feed them while they're going to school, and it does take a while. So like I said, I'm personally a bigger fan of simply buying the units, and one of the best ways to buy them is first get the founding father that decreases the cost by 25%, which is pretty significant over the long term. So that, like I said, we're going to move the soldier back into my settlement. And as you can see right here, we have our first inklings of independence. So right above our settlement bar, you hover over the city, the settlement information where it says New Amsterdam. There is a little American flag. If I keep zooming in, it will just disappear. So it's not going to get bigger. But you can see a little American flag, and there's a 7% next to it. And that means that 7% of our people in there support revolution. Now, in here, in actuality, it's actually lower because not all of our units are in that settlement. It's actually at 3% worldwide, but this settlement is at 7%. And I think at this point, that is enough for episode number 1. We have covered some of the very basics of it, and I'll likely be reiterating a lot of these points in later episodes. I'm not sure how many I'm going to need to explain all of this because it is fairly different from regular Civilization gameplay. So I will be continuing this series on that, but you have a foundation here on what to look for when settling, choosing your civilization, finding a location to settle, and interacting with the Native Americans. We have not yet met another European nation, but this is 4 turns in, and you have an idea of how to get started in the game. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.